I'm going to present a bold vision for how to slash cancer deaths in 5 years. And that number 5 is a significant number for today's cancer patients because it takes a decade or more to be able to develop a new drug. So anything that is not in the clinic today is not going to be helpful in making a meaningful, bending the curve within 5 years. But what can happen is using AI to be able to do a better job of matching patients to treatments that will be effective for them, and perhaps combining treatments into more effective combinations. And the thing that I realized just by being here with all of the innovation that we heard about is another opportunity is to use AI to match cancer patients to innovations that might otherwise take years to get into the clinic and be able to bring that into the clinic much faster. So fasten your seatbelts. We're going to go through some really interesting things. You've heard a little bit of introduction about me. I've, pioneered computer science. I was lucky enough to be a computer scientist in Silicon Valley during the entire time period dating back to the 1960s. Robots I built in the late 60s and the early 70s are in the Smithsonian and the Computer History Museum. A company called Enterprise Integration Technologies, which I founded in 1990, created internet commerce as you know it. And we made the first secure transactions on the web settled with a credit card. That was in 1993, just a couple of years after the web was invented. I went on to start half a dozen other companies, all of them successful, and some of them very successful. Two of the companies went public. Mark Andreessen, a well-known venture capitalist, worked for EIT at that time, spun out Netscape, and 3 other billion-dollar companies spun out of this, including one that I later joined as the chief scientist, a company called Commerce One, which had a market cap of 24 billion at its peak. So I've had some impact in a lot of fields. And then I got cancer. And that was 1998. I was diagnosed with melanoma metastatic to liver and given 9 months to live. And I had all the money in the world and no time. And I went to all the local oncologists who told me the prognosis was dire, get my affairs in order. I had an ace in the hole. I was working with Rick Klausner, who was running the National Cancer Institute, doing some pro bono consulting that actually got NCI into informatics, which I hadn't been prior. And he fixed me up with physician scientists at places like UCLA and USC and John Wayne Cancer Center. They had all was still saying that the prognosis was not good. But if you wanted to try a Hail Mary, I have a trial you might want to consider. I have something in the back room. And there, instead of having no options, I had the opposite problem. Too many options and zero data to try to make that kind of connection. Ultimately, my life was saved by a clinical trial that failed. But it helped some of us on the long tail, and I was fortunate enough to be an exceptional responder. But unfortunately, all of the data and all of the drugs from that trial were thrown away when the trial failed. And I just, resolved at that point, if I were to get my health back, I was going to do something to help to make sure this would never happen again, and to help other patients who were facing either too few options or too many options to be able to find what they needed. And so I started an organization, nonprofit called Cancer Commons, which takes patients who are beyond the standard of care, exhausted all the guidelines and the clinical trials, which are the extensions of the guidelines, and connect them with physicians and researchers who can help them find and access novel treatments, tests, and trials that might be of help to them. And particularly important because, remember, these are late-stage patients who have exhausted the easy stuff, connecting them with innovators, researchers, and companies who might have something that might benefit them and get that into the clinic years earlier than it might otherwise get. And so and everything we learn from this, we share with the world. We've helped over 10,000 patients in the decade plus that we've been around. And I'm very, very proud of that number. For the kinds of patients we're dealing with, it's similar to what a major cancer center might have dealt with over that time period. But this is a drop in the bucket. The need is much closer to, say, 10,000 a month. And the manual processes that we've been using in Cancer Commons just would not be able to scale at that level. So 5 years ago, I spun off one more company, which is a health IT company called XCures, to automate the processes that we use and transform Cancer Commons into a learning health system. And by that, I mean taking research and care and tightly integrating them so that we continuously learn from every patient, right? A perpetual trial, if you like, which is a much more cost-effective thing to do than just to run specific trials for specific drugs. More on that later. The key element of software is software that pulls electronic medical records in real time for the patients that come to us and structures them so that we have a concise patient profile, right? And we might get 1,000 pages of PDF, and that has to be reduced to a simple timeline and a description of that patient. Then Cancer Commons takes that profile and looks up what treatments might be, what treatments patients like these did and how well they worked. Look up that data. And then be able to ask, what did the experts recommend for those patients? And these are not always the same. And when they're different, that's interesting because then we can do some science. We can run some experiments to be able to see who got it right, the experts or the other. And often there's no data at all because things haven't been tried. Then you only have the expert recommendations. And patients will try some of these things, and then we'll take the recommendations and turn them into data, and we can close the learning loop. Now, a key reason why this can work is that no one in the cancer world shares data. Silos. Everyone thinks the data is valuable, and no one really does all that much with it. But the people who have a stake in the game, patients, they're willing to consent. And so we get patients to sign a HIPAA right of release, and we get the data for them in return for the services that we provide them. And at the moment, the XCures platform has a couple of 100,000 patients on it, which is not large compared to the very large databases that maybe NCI has. But we know how to scale now, and we'll have millions of patients by the end of this year. And all of that data is available to people. And it comes from thousands of sites, right? 200,000 patients from thousands of sites. That's kind of dramatic. What can we do with that data to fulfill the goal that I set, which is meaningfully bend the curve in cancer over the next 5 years? Number one is get every patient up to the level of the best docs on the planet, right? And it's well known that outcomes fall off pretty rapidly as you move from a major cancer center out into the community and then on into underserved communities and third world communities and so forth. What if every patient could be treated with the knowledge of the best? The problem is we don't know who's best. But now we have the data at least to be able to find out. And not everyone's the best at everything, right? So we can find out what's the best way to treat these patients that we know and get that information to the point of care much more efficiently than we can through a traditional journal. Many lives can be saved with no new knowledge and no new drugs. Just get the knowledge that exists over here to where it's needed. But what if the level of the best is not good enough? For many diseases like glioblastoma or pancreatic cancer or metastatic breast cancer, triple negative, there's far too many deaths still. And the problem is that no one knows the optimal way to treat any of these cancers. There's far more, every cancer is unique at the molecular level. It needs to be treated with a unique, individualized combination of therapies. And there are far more rational combinations than there are patients in the universe to be able to treat this cancer. That said, every day there are thousands of experiments that go on in oncology offices across the world. Desperate oncologists and desperate patients tweaking protocols, adding something, removing something, changing the dose, changing the order. The combinations are just explosive. You can't do that with clinical trials. So I might say that no one in the world knows the optimal way to treat any cancer, or even how to find that out, at least through the traditional way. But in the system that I described for you, we can, in fact, learn from every one of those experiments to see what's working and what's not working and rapidly replicate the successes and quash the failures, basically flipping the paradigm from a trial that's about approving a drug to a trial that's about curing patients, a perpetual trial. The third opportunity is to be able to use this platform to connect patients to the kinds of innovations that we've heard about today years earlier than might otherwise happen. There's 3 examples on this slide. One of them is precision oncology tests and services that can predict and monitor response to therapy, or predict or monitor and predict the evolution of a tumor to try to get out ahead of it. And we need to be able to bring these to patients because it removes the guesswork, right? So if any of you are working on these kinds of things, we can bring them to our patients and be able to make better treatment decisions. We can run exploratory investigator-initiated studies. If you're an investigator and you have a theory that maybe 2 drugs can be used, maybe combined off-label to do a better job of treating a given cancer, instead of thinking about running a trial, which is a years-long process just to plan it and get it funded and get it IRB approved, we can take these patients in Cancer Commons who are beyond the standard of care and treat them ethically and through compassionate use or single subject INDs in order to be able to make this happen. Early detection tests, very, very important, can save lots of lives. We need to get them out of the lab and into patients. Cancer Commons can help by connecting the companies or the researchers that have these innovations to the patients who need them, and be able to provide all the other aspects of getting into the clinic early, to get the data to train, for example, AI models and validate whether these tests or services are helpful. Patient navigation services to help patients understand and act on the results of a new test. And this is very, very important if we're trying to do early detection on a population scale. And be able to integrate tests from multiple vendors. This is not what individual companies can go do, but almost certainly the optimal way to be able to match patients to treatments or trials and be able to do early detection is to combine complementary tests, digital imaging, digital pathology, liquid biopsies, and be able to combine that maybe with a third-party AI, bioinformatics and AI decision support. This is where Cancer Commons can help move things forward very quickly. And finally, it doesn't matter how good the data is if you don't have the capital to be able to invest in moving this stuff forward. And believe me, in this current funding environment, we have many companies that we're working with that have very promising results that we've gotten from a handful of patients, Cancer Commons patients, that they don't have the money to be able to complete the trials. And these companies and their innovations, many of them are going to just disappear. And that's tragic, especially when we have the opportunity to be able to try these in a handful of patients at very little cost, and then be able to double down on the winners. If there's a big signal, then invest in doing a trial. That kind of turns the paradigm on its head, right? Make lots of small bets, see which ones work, and then invest. And this idea is pretty powerful, and we're in the process of trying to raise $50 to $100 million in an impact fund to be able to invest in this very, very unique deal flow. It's drugs and tests and other kinds of therapies that our physicians and researchers want to use for these very ill patients, and be able to test them at a small dollar rate, but be able to then have the money to invest in a trial if and when these things are showing a big signal. The other thing, aside from a unique deal flow, is a unique way of raising the capital, largely from family offices, impact investors that have children or loved ones that are dealing with a particular cancer, because we can do a lot with a few $1 million in the paradigm that I described to you. Here's a summary of the things that we talked about over the last 10 minutes. And I've got to tell you that I think if we can do more, even a few of these, we'll have a very good shot at slashing cancer mortality, at least in some cancers, by 25% or more in 5 years. And there's nothing else I know about that can have that kind of impact. But the thing to keep in mind is that the platform that I talked about, the Learning Health System platform that's making all of this possible, is merely context. All of the meat that's making this happen are the kinds of innovations that you all are developing that we've heard about at this session that maybe you're an investor in. And we can really accelerate the progress for you as well as save lots of lives by getting these to patients earlier. Cancer Commons can provide you with patients who have exhausted the standard of care, doctors who are comfortable treating with innovative therapies, the capital that is needed to make this happen. So I'm hoping that during the reception, many of you will come and seek me out. And my final word is that if you know anyone who is dealing with a serious cancer, send them to Cancer Commons. We can do what we've done for 10,000 others, and everything we do is supported by philanthropy, and so it's available at no cost to patients. I would like to very much thank Andrea and Judy, Gassan, and Mark and the TDG crew for this tremendous opportunity to be able to talk to you and hopefully engage with the UCLA and greater LA community. Thank you very much.